So off to the races? I don't know. Honestly. So like I look at these and I did a little looking at the information back, and it looks like it's a multivitamin with an absolute boatload of fat on them. So yeah, I feel like that amount of fat content in a day is likely to, how would I say it, lubricate the tubes a little bit. So I have a little bit of moderate anxiety about doing this, but we got 4 weeks to do it, so I guess we'll become familiar with the consequences as we go. So, ingredients: MTC and butter blend, sunflower seed butter, cocoa butter, almond butter, so palm oil, coconut, inulin, protein blend, soluble corn fiber, unsweetened chocolate, tapioca syrup, erythritol, whey protein crisps, glycerin. Oh, good Lord. This sounds like a laxative bar. Natural flavors, sunflower lecithin, sea salt, stevia extract, natural vanilla extract, and mixed tocopherols. So we have erythritol, glycerin, stevia extract, so we've got some stevia extract. Shouldn't be too bad. Erythritol, I believe, is one of the ones that can cause some laxative consequences. So I think you don't want to eat too many of these in a day. Glycerin is a natural laxative that you can get at the pharmacy. I'm kind of curious about the tapioca syrup. So it says here that this is total carbohydrates is 15 grams. Dietary fiber is 9 of those. Total sugars 3. Erythritol is 2 grams. So it's interesting that they classify that as separate from total sugars. It's not a fiber, but it does contribute to the total carbohydrate load. So this is going to be about 5 grams of carbohydrate, it looks like. No, wait. So we've got total sugars 3, erythritol 2, dietary fibers 9. Oh, and this also apparently is 32% of your daily recommended value of fiber. Good Lord. A lot of fiber, a lot of artificial sweetener, well, not a lot, but erythritol and glycerin. So quasi-laxative consequences on those with your fiber intake. Whoo, that's going to be a fun ride. It's interesting to note that this has 7 grams of protein. Total fat is going to be 7 grams of saturated fat. So 35% of your daily recommended saturated fat. But your total fat is 19% your daily recommended value. So that's interesting. And one of these bars is 190 calories. which is about roughly about what you get with 2 slices of ham lunch meat and 2 eggs, if you don't use any oils or whatever. Yeah, so it's about the same as 2 eggs with 2 slices of ham. But it does look like it's like vitamin D, 25% of your daily recommended value, 20 of your iron, vitamin A, 40, vitamin E, 80, thiamine, 40, niacin, 60, folate, 40, biotin, 450% of your daily recommended value, phosphorus, 15, magnesium, 25, selenium, 15, manganese, 45, which, I mean, manganese is one of those things where, like, if you eat a portion of vegetables with every meal, there's a very good chance you'll exceed your daily recommended value, but there's no upper threshold that you have to worry about. Molybdenum, yeah, something like that. 50%, calcium 6%, potassium. Oh, potassium's 2%, which I have a friend who's he has to watch his blood sugar, so he could probably benefit from going low carb. And he has early stage kidney issues, so he has to watch his potassium intake. And a potassium content that's below 5% of your daily recommended value would be like, he'd probably be all right with a lot of that. Now, are there other things that he has to be careful about kidney-wise? Maybe. I don't know. Vitamin C, 30% of your daily recommended value. Vitamin K, 15%. Riboflavin, 40. B6, 40. B12, 110%. Now, I know that I have a genetic predisposition to having low quantities of, or low ability to absorb B12 and folate and vitamin D. So we have 25% of my daily recommended value of vitamin D and 110 of my B12, 40% of my B6. Do we have a folate? I forget if that's, yeah, folate was 40%. There you go. And niacin, 60%. Okay, pantothenic acid, 100%. Iodine, 30%. Zinc, 45%. Copper, 35%. And chromium, 140%. So, I mean, it is really a multivitamin in bar form. I'm still a little disconcerted with the erythritol. I'm not doing a plan so much as just finding stuff you can find. I got this at Walmart. So this is a meal bar. It's an optimal low carb ketogenic nutrition meal bar. Slim fast keto. Keto made easy. And then it says you can text now for your 7-day meal planner. What I've been basically doing, and we'll get to the taste test in that a bit. I'm still very nervous about that one because it has glycerin, it has erythritol, and it has what was it? The 32% of my daily recommended value of fiber. So erythritol can pressurize your gastrointestinal tract by because it's not necessarily an absorbable carbohydrate. It may be a potentially fermentable carbohydrate, which can give you a lot of gas. And since I'll be adding fiber and glycerin, which actually has some lubricating qualities to it, I'm getting a distinct feeling that this is going to be rather like eating prunes, which I believe is what the one of the carbohydrates in prunes may actually be erythritol. I'd have to look that up again, but just off of the top of my head, I think I recall something like that. But I got this at Walmart. I've got another one I'll do tomorrow. I'm sort of just trying out a new thing here and sticking to relatively basic eggs, cheese, nuts, peanut butter, kind of fill out the rest of it. I am sort of struggling with it. So I ran the calculations based off of roughly where you want your carbohydrate, fat, and protein levels to be on a day. And I can go into a little bit of detail on this. This is a little bit more of I cover this during the end of September, where I cover the diet during the week and then the exercise starting during that week. But I did a little bit of calculation, and roughly the keto recommended food approach is usually in the range of 70-35 or 70-25, 10%. So 70 to 75% fat, 20 roughly in that range of protein, and then 5 to 10 max of your carbohydrate. Now, I don't have a lot of trouble making the carbohydrates disappear. Like, I don't eat a lot of carby foods. I think we saw in my week of doing the carb dominant diet, or 4 weeks of doing that it doesn't work for me very well. I don't like it. It causes me very easily to not be able to concentrate. It makes me very ADD. But the ratios, you can fudge it a little bit based off your activity level. And I'm actually probably going to have to back off my exercise routine a little bit for this time period, because I want to compare this evenly with the carbohydrate diet, and in the future compare the protein diet with it. So activity level should be relatively the same for all of them. My exercise capabilities have increased drastically, but I did a set of exercise routine the other day where I'm pretty sure, if my calculations are correct, I was burning 2,000 calories of exercise, which it didn't cause me any problems and I didn't hurt the next day. But I can't go burning 2,000 calories when my caloric intake for the day is 2,000 calories and expect a comparable measure for when I was burning 500 some odd calories and consuming 2,000 calories. So I have to really kind of match my exercise routine that I was doing before, and I need to match my caloric intake to the same level. So I was crunching some of the details of how I usually eat. Like, I eat ham, which is a leaner meat. I may have to swap that out for ground beef. And I do 2 eggs, meat. So it's usually like 2 eggs, 2 slices of ham, and that's sort of like, that's a meal sometimes for me. But the issue I'm having with that is that gets me, if I do that 3 times in a day, I can get about 600 calories from that. But the ratios I'm getting from that are 0 carbs for the most part, and almost 50% protein, 50% fat. Where I'm looking to get 70 to 75% fat and roughly 20% protein. How do you do that? Do people literally just sit down with a bowl full of butter? Because I'm looking at some of the information, and even the uh, aged cheddar cheese that I could use. I'm looking at the aged cheddar cheese, and it has 7 grams of protein to 9 grams of fat. So if I did nothing other than just eating cheese, I still would end up with higher amounts of protein, lower amounts of fat per ratio. So in order to get the amount of fat that I would need to get from cheese or eggs, for that matter, I'd be getting way more protein than the 20% by ratio. So I'm sort of kind of puzzling that one out a little bit. I'm like, what are people doing to get that fat quantity? And the only thing I can think of is like butters, cooking oil. So like if I did like I might be able to make it work. If I did like a chef salad and did an oil and maybe a little vinegar, some nuts and seeds on there, like a hard-boiled egg and some meat, like make a chef salad that way. And oil and vinegar dressing would work to up my fat intake, and cook my eggs with butter and cheese, and you can get the fat up there. But I mean, the cheese and the eggs add protein. I have to take a look. I'd be willing to bet mayonnaise, so I might be able to do like tuna in vegetable oil, mixed with mayonnaise and egg salad. So eggs and mayo, mayo is just the egg yolk in a lot of cases, mostly with different types of oil. And I may have to make my own mayonnaise at home, honestly, because a lot of them include some carbohydrates in them that are not necessary. But we'll just see what I can do. I mean, I'm not in any risk of overdoing the what is it? 30 grams of carbs that I can max out at for my weight and body mass index. It's, I'm not going to hit that. Like on a good day where I'm not even eating anything other than my usual food, I think I probably run pretty low on the carbohydrates. Somewhere in that 20 to 15 grams of carbs in a day, probably. Not counting whatever's in my vegetables that I eat. The vegetable ratio of carbohydrates isn't super high. Not the ones that I eat anyway. But like, it is weird to, think about like what I'm getting protein wise to fat wise, and like 75% fat for my activity level and my size. That's like, I don't like, other than just drenching everything in oil, like, how do people achieve that? That's kind of hard to do. And I am also a little worried about that because, again, a lot of fat, the glycerin, the fiber, and the erythritol. I mean, you're talking a major recipe for explosive digestive. So I have a little bit of like, we'll see. So as you're talking about like where do I get the plans? This was not a plan per se. It does say that I can text for a plan. I'm not that particularly worried about it, honestly. I know I can get nuts. I know I can get vegetable oils and olive oils and coconut oil and butter, eggs and ground beef, fish. Those are places where I can get higher fat to protein ratios. It seems like eating an awful lot of fat. And so I'm looking at I'm looking at the possibility of the things like erythritol and these things are not like you don't want to eat a lot of the sugar-free candies or things like that because those artificial sweeteners don't do good things to your system. And I think the reason a lot of people benefit from doing something like this is you're not eating cheesecake and donuts and pasta and stuff like that. You're shifting away from those types of food. It's not necessarily that you're like to replace a non-keto donut with a keto donut. I think you're not going to benefit from that any better. So I feel like the real focus of what I should be doing and people who do this kind of thing should be doing is potentially more you should be looking at increasing your vegetable intake and cutting your grain and starch intake, which is just smart eating anyway. And it's something I have a tendency to do anyway. But so I want to give this a try and see what the consequences of this are. I will probably have issues, I imagine, with some of this for a few days as I adapt to it. So I'm curious to see what kind of I mean, the other thing I did snag, and it was a bag of pork rinds, and even doing the calculations on pork rinds, you have a half ounce of pork rinds has 9 grams of protein and 8 grams of fat, I believe, or maybe that's reversed. It might actually be the other way around. I have to look at the bag again, and so I'm like, so even if you were to eat pork rinds and cheese, you're still going to get a higher 20 to 25% protein intake. Okay, so this is going to be a meal bar. That's disconcerting. So it's not a particularly large thing, and like the package makes it look bigger, but that's the thing inside the package. So it doesn't look like a lot. I don't know, and it says it's salted caramel and macadamia nut. So yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure that this is going to be particularly filling, but being a fat base rather than a carbohydrate base, that's I don't imagine it's going to be. It might be a little bit filling, but I don't think it's going to leave the same sensation of satiety that I want. I don't think I'm going to feel as satisfied as I would like. Ooh, it's it's slippery, which is kind of gross. So, all right, well, we'll see. The smell is interesting. It smells very rich, but it doesn't taste as candy-like as I expected. Seriously, dude, could you maybe grow up a little bit? Don't spam my channel. So, anyway, what are you, 12? So, the texture on this it's actually a little bit more solid than I expected it to be, but it disintegrates really easily. And it doesn't have any of the
protein. It's not like a marshmallow or a nougat or a whipped meringue or anything like that. It's sort of like I was going to say it's sort of like a dry, less sweet peanut butter that you would find inside of like a Reese's peanut butter cup. So looking at the ingredients, it's really just going to be the looks like butter, MCT oil, sunflower seed butter, cocoa butter, almond butter. So I really feel like you could get a similar texture if you used like a cellulose binder in a coconut oil. Yeah, I think the thing I'm sort of missing on the texture there is the aeration, the whipped, or there's also a absence of a gumminess or a protein texture that you could potentially get a more tooth, a texture feel to the food that I think be a little more pleasing. This is really more of a trying to think of something that compares to this. You must really like the channel if you're continuing to hang out here and nobody gives a crap what you're talking about. So thanks for the additional response on the channel. It gives feedback and brings more people to the show. But actually, when I really get a sense of this, it has a little bit of the crispness, the firmness of if you ever had like a Butterfinger. But this doesn't flake. It doesn't crackle. It doesn't have the crystalline structure of like a sugar. So it's a weird texture. I imagine if all these keto meal foods are as textured as this is. Actually, I'm trying to think. It's got some qualities similar to cheeses, like a mozzarella cheese, but it doesn't have any of the protein spring to the bite. And it doesn't crumble like an aged cheddar, but an aged cheddar is pretty close in texture. It's not like an egg. I'm underwhelmed at this point, and the sense that this is one bar that's almost already gone, I don't feel like it's particularly filling volume-wise, but I think it's probably going to sit heavy enough that I wouldn't want to eat too much of it. So I'm actually kind of a little curious. See if I can pull up the Slim Fast Keto website and see what their recommendations for a meal plan are. I'm not going to follow their meal plan because I think a lot of these companies are out there just to sell you something, and there's liable to be a fair amount of BS and marketing involved with that. So Let's see what we can get from their website. Okay, so what's the all right, pull the website off of that. And okay, what do we got? No, I don't want to purchase stuff from Amazon. I'm looking for their freaking website. Do they even have it anymore, or is it gone? That's advertising. So that's the website for the company, Slim Fast. Recipes it suggests. Success stories. I mean, it gets very cultish at that point. Resources. So recipes. What do they say for recipes? Okay, so they've got shrimp and cauliflower grits, kale and goat cheese with grilled chicken. So they've got some recipes here that you could follow and make on their website. And let's take a look at they don't look like, there we go. So they do have a way of separating them out. When you go to their website, they're not all keto based. So you have to select the keto button to make that functional to get you what you're looking for the keto. And now we're looking at keto matzo ball soup, which I'm actually kind of curious about because broth is a good source of fats. It also gets you some of the protein too. So it's not as necessarily viable as a way of reconciling that fat to protein ratio that I was struggling with earlier. But keto pizzas, I mean, it seems to me it's sort of like the wrong way to go to seek out those foods that weren't good for you when they're not keto. Like, don't replace a non-keto pizza with a keto pizza, because then you're just still eating the poor choices that you were eating before. It's just you've exchanged a few ingredients for other ingredients. So I'm kind of curious what they say for the matzo ball soup. Let's see if I can get this down here. So make matzo balls on any time of year meal with this keto rendition of, all right, whatever. Eggs, oil, water, salt, almond flour, flaxseed. So it's sort of like a nut and seed flour. Excuse me. Cover bowl, boil water, take the mixture from the refrigerator. So it really looks like it gets its substance from almond flour and flaxseed. So that's looks like they got keto crab cake. What do they got there? I'm willing to bet you it's going to have cream cheese. Oil, shallots, garlic, crab, egg, mayonnaise, hot sauce, mustard, parsley, chives, and seafood seasoning to the crab. Almond, coconut flour. So yeah, it really seems like they're going more in the direction of a nut flour mix. There's still like an aftertaste of that bar. It's not my favorite. I feel like the I think it's probably the artificial sweetener, leaving some of the aftertones in there. It has a not quite sugar taste, and they don't seem to use a lot of it. If they did use a fair amount of it, you wouldn't be able to tell, because the flavor doesn't taste sweet in my mind. So I'm very curious to see how well that'll settle. And it's not. I've had like if you've ever had the what's that? Soylent. The Soylent drinks, like the plain Soylent drink tastes a little bit like somebody stirred sawdust in water. It's not impressive. It's not a pleasant taste. You can flavor it with some other things, but there's always going to be that hint of sawdust flavor in it. And I feel like there's a little bit of that sense to this as well. These keto bars. I feel like it's potentially got a bit of. It doesn't say anything about a cellulose base that I can remember here. So soluble corn fiber, though, and a plain protein blend, which is a whey protein and sunflower lecithin. And I'm kind of curious about those tapioca syrups. I'd be curious, and I might actually see you during the course of the next 4 weeks where I play around with this a little bit. I'd be curious to pull out a blood sugar monitor and see if it causes any spikes. Tapioca syrup. My mind says if it's called a syrup, it's got to be a carbohydrate base. Like organic tapioca would offer health. So can we get some data on it? Tapioca syrup is a corn syrup replacer. That immediately sets off some warning bells for me there. If your intent is to, like, we use corn syrup already too much as a filler in foods. It's in things it shouldn't be in, and there's absolutely no reason why your ranch dressing should have corn syrup in it. And if we just substitute tapioca syrup for corn syrup, it seems to me counterproductive. And I imagine, corn syrup seemed like a perfectly good thing to substitute in for filler to add caloric content to food choices at a certain time. We're now starting to see the consequences of that choice, resulting from using what we considered an innocuous filler or adder to foods. I feel like replacing it with something like a tapioca syrup, they may seem innocuous now, but that's probably largely due to the fact that we have not been using it for 20 years. And I imagine in 10 to 15 years, we'd be looking back and saying, like, wow, we really shouldn't have been adding that to food because it does such and such. I don't know that it has any obvious, currently recognized excessive dangers, but we're also not putting tapioca syrup in 50% of our food. So while it seems intuitive that more natural sweeteners might be beneficial, so tapioca syrup, they're saying here is the risk of using that is it adds more calories. Well, that's sort of the point at this point, I think. If you add caloric content that is not a straight sucralose, I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. 1/4 cup of commercially available tapioca syrup has 168 calories. Yeah. While an equivalent serving of regular granulated sugar has about 30 more calories than that. And tapioca syrup and sugar contain 42 to 50% or 50 grams of sugar per serving. So yeah, I don't see a lot of information out there about tapioca syrup to get a sense of its chemical structure, which if it were a sucralose or even a glucose fructose combination, like a corn syrups oftentimes are a combination of those. I mean, it's not a good substitute for sugar because it's just the same caloric density. Since yeah, I don't see anybody who can give me reliable information about the chemistry of tapioca syrup, which suggests to me that the only reason they're getting away with using it is because there's not enough data to suggest that it's not healthy. Now, there's nothing wrong with carbohydrates. Too many people get weird about it. It's kind of a stupid way to do it, but the goal this next series of weeks is just to try out the recommendations for a keto diet. I already sort of have an expectation of what I'm going to experience on this, and it's not these miracle wonders that so many of the weirdos out there pursuing keto think everything is. But it's not going to kill me. It's not going to hurt me. I'm not going to do it for 4 years in a row, but yeah, I'm very kind of curious to see where this goes. So at that point, we're almost about 45 minutes in. I'm about ready to call it for the evening. I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll try to update some of my other videos today. I know I'm a little bit behind on some of that schedule, but I'll do what I can tonight, and curious to see where the rest of this week goes. All right. Take care.